Here's a truth that will challenge everything you think you know about success. Sometimes the smartest leaders are the ones who lose on purpose. Sometimes, the most strategic move is to accept defeat in small battles so you can achieve victory in the war that really matters. Most executives are so focused on winning every quarterly report, every competitive skirmish, every short-term metric that they lose sight of the ultimate prize. They win battles and lose wars. Hello, everyone. My name is Shirley, and I am the AI avatar for Touchstone Publishers. Let's get real about leadership. Today, we're diving into Strategy 12 from Robert Greene's The 33 Strategies of War. And this might be the most counterintuitive strategy in the entire book. We're talking about grand strategy, or as Greene puts it, lose battles but win the war. This isn't about accepting mediocrity or giving up when things get tough. This is about something much more sophisticated. Understanding that not every battle is worth winning, and that sometimes tactical losses can lead to strategic victories. It's about having the vision to see beyond immediate results to long-term outcomes. The problem with most leaders today is that they're trapped in short-term thinking. They're so focused on quarterly earnings, monthly metrics, and immediate wins that they make decisions that feel good in the moment, but undermine their long-term position. They're playing checkers when they should be playing chess. Let me tell you about one of the most brilliant examples of grand strategy in military history. During World War II, the Soviet Union faced a devastating invasion by Nazi Germany. In the first months of the war, the Germans achieved stunning victories, capturing millions of Soviet soldiers and advancing deep into Soviet territory. Most military observers thought the Soviet Union was finished. The Germans were winning every major battle, capturing every strategic objective, and the Red Army seemed to be in complete collapse. But Soviet leader Joseph Stalin and his generals understood something that the Germans didn't. They were fighting two different wars. The Germans were fighting a war of battles, focused on immediate tactical victories and territorial gains. The Soviets were fighting a war of attrition, focused on long-term strategic positioning and ultimate survival. So the Soviets made a series of decisions that looked like defeats, but were actually strategic victories. They traded space for time, allowing the Germans to advance deep into Soviet territory while preserving their military forces. They relocated their industrial capacity beyond German reach, even though it meant temporary production losses. They accepted massive casualties in some battles while avoiding the decisive engagement that could have ended the war. Here's what made this approach brilliant. While the Germans were celebrating their tactical victories, they were actually weakening their strategic position. Their supply lines were getting longer and more vulnerable. Their forces were getting spread thinner across an enormous front. They were fighting in conditions and terrain that favored their opponents. Meanwhile, the Soviets were using their apparent defeats to build long-term advantages. They were learning German tactics and adapting their strategies. They were building new weapons and training new soldiers. They were preparing for the kind of prolonged conflict that would ultimately favor their superior resources and industrial capacity. The result was one of the most dramatic reversals in military history. The Germans, who had seemed so dominant in 1941, found themselves fighting a war they couldn't win by 1943. The Soviets had lost countless battles but won the war. Now, you might be thinking, that's a compelling historical example, Shirley, but how does this apply to modern business? The truth is, some of the most successful business strategies involve accepting short-term losses to achieve long-term victories. Think about how Amazon approached profitability for nearly 2 decades. Jeff Bezos could have focused on quarterly profits and satisfied Wall Street analysts by cutting investments and maximizing short-term returns. Instead, he chose to lose the profitability battle quarter after quarter while building the infrastructure and market position that would make Amazon dominant for decades. Wall Street criticized Amazon's losses, competitors celebrated their superior profit margins, and analysts questioned Bezos' strategy. But Bezos understood that he was fighting a different war. While competitors were optimizing for quarterly results, he was building long-term competitive advantages that would be nearly impossible to replicate. Or consider how Netflix handled the transition from DVDs to streaming. Reed Hastings could have focused on protecting Netflix's profitable DVD business and maximizing short-term cash flow. Instead, he chose to cannibalize his own successful business model, accepting lower profits and customer complaints in the short term to position Netflix for the streaming future. This meant losing to competitors like Redbox in the DVD market and accepting criticism from investors who didn't understand the long-term vision. But Hastings was playing a different game. While others were fighting for market share in a declining business, he was building dominance in the business that would define the future of entertainment. So, how do you develop the strategic vision to lose battles while winning wars? How do you resist the pressure for short-term results when long-term positioning requires temporary sacrifices? Let me give you a practical framework that you can start implementing immediately. First, define your ultimate victory. What does winning the war actually look like for your organization? Not next quarter or next year, but 5 or 10 years from now. What position do you want to hold in your market? What capabilities do you want to have? What legacy do you want to create? This long-term vision becomes your North Star for making strategic trade-offs. Second, identify strategic versus tactical battles. Not every competitive challenge deserves the same level of response. Some battles are existential. If you lose them, nothing else matters. Others are tactical. Winning them feels good, but doesn't change your long-term position. Focus your resources on the battles that move you closer to your ultimate victory. Third, practice intelligent sacrifice. Look for opportunities where short-term losses can create long-term advantages. This might mean investing in capabilities that won't pay off for years, entering markets where you'll initially lose money, or developing products that cannibalize your existing revenue streams. Fourth, build strategic patience into your organization's culture. Help your team understand that not every metric needs to improve every quarter, that not every competitive move requires an immediate response, and that sometimes the best strategy is to let competitors exhaust themselves fighting battles that don't matter. Fifth, create long-term metrics that track progress toward your ultimate objectives, not just short-term performance. These might include market position indicators, capability development measures, or strategic option values that won't show up in quarterly earnings but are crucial for long-term success. Finally, develop stakeholder education programs that help investors, employees, and other stakeholders understand your long-term strategy and why short-term sacrifices are necessary for long-term victory. Let me share a perfect example of this strategy in modern business. When Elon Musk was building Tesla, he faced enormous pressure to focus on immediate profitability and compete directly with established automakers on their terms. Traditional automotive analysts expected Tesla to follow the conventional path, start with cheaper, simpler vehicles to build market share and cash flow, then gradually move upmarket. This would have meant accepting lower margins, competing primarily on price, and fighting established players in their strongest market segments. Instead, Musk chose to lose several battles in order to win the war for the future of transportation. He started with expensive luxury vehicles that had low volume but high margins. He invested heavily in battery technology and charging infrastructure that wouldn't pay off for years. He accepted massive losses while building manufacturing capabilities that traditional automakers dismissed as unnecessary. Critics attacked Tesla's production delays, quality issues, and cash burn rate. Competitors celebrated their superior manufacturing efficiency and profitability. Analysts questioned whether Tesla could ever become a viable mass-market automaker. But Musk was fighting a different war. While traditional automakers were optimizing their internal combustion engine vehicles and protecting their existing profit streams, Tesla was building the capabilities and market position that would define the electric vehicle future. The result has been extraordinary. Tesla went from a startup that most people expected to fail to the most valuable automaker in the world. The battles they lost in the early years, profitability, production volume, traditional automotive metrics, became irrelevant as they won the war for electric vehicle leadership. Here's what you need to remember about losing battles to win wars. First, not all victories are created equal. Some wins feel good, but don't advance your strategic position, while some losses actually strengthen your long-term competitive advantage. Second, the most dangerous trap for leaders is optimizing for metrics that don't matter in the long run. Quarterly earnings, monthly market share, and annual growth rates are important, but they shouldn't drive decisions that undermine your ultimate strategic objectives. Third, grand strategy requires the courage to accept criticism and misunderstanding from people who are focused on short-term results. The most strategic leaders are often the most misunderstood in the short term. So here's my challenge for you. What battle are you fighting right now that might not matter for your long-term success? What short-term metric are you optimizing for that might be preventing you from building a long-term competitive advantage? What would change if you were willing to accept some tactical losses in order to position yourself for strategic victory? Share below one area where you're ready to think more strategically about winning the war, not just the battle. Let's get real about leadership.